Richard Carlton here. Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. I got a bunch of questions and answers. I've got lots of awesomeness. So real quick, welcome to fmtraining.tv, where we learn about the FileMaker platform. It is awesome. Today is another day we're talking about 19.5. 19.5 is effectively a really big bug fix release, which is great. I think Claris is spending a big chunk of their time fixing bugs, doing some things that they could have done, wish list for a long time. They're adding them in there. Server-side sorts, server-side summary calculation if the server's available, some other backup improvements. There's some good things in it. We do have one reported bug. I will get to that momentarily. We talked yesterday about 19.5. I'm going to recap it briefly. 19.5 is basically like 2.5 new features, but it's like 400 bug fixes across the board. Pro fixes, go fixes, server fixes, a couple server performance things that are good, and a bunch of WebDirect fixes if you're using WebDirect. So we loosely kind of skimmed through those yesterday. Today is kind of an open Q&A on 19.5 and also on server. And Jacob's going to walk us through a Linux installation of FileMaker Server today. So yesterday we had Claris people on, and never had that before. We had really good attendance. Hopefully, if we have good attendance and you folks behave yourselves pretty well, which Ruben mostly did, then the Claris people feel like they can come back and they feel like they're not exposed to danger, right? So we're doing this 30-day beginning training course idea, 30 days of intensive. We took a 2-day break, and that was Wednesday, yesterday, and today, Thursday. Then we resume about halfway through over here. We'll run it through probably the first week of July. So let's talk about that real quick. If you go to fmtrain.tv, you see this 30-day kind of free page here. What we're going to do is in the future, you won't even get to this intermediate page right here. You'll just get to this page right here, which comes out of FileMaker. So this is records in FileMaker. So this is day 1, day 2, day 3. So this is not as good as our paid training, but it's like 30, if you only had like, say, 15 or 20 hours of training over, say, 30 different videos, this is going to kind of be our freebie thing that we're going to throw out for people. If they want to go deeper than this, they need to really buy the paid training. You guys should have the paid training anyway. It's better. This is good, but it's just, the paid training is way over like 120 hours, and this is going to be maybe max of about 30 hours, right? So question, are we safe to install 19.5 or will it break stuff? Okay, the only telemetry I have thus far in 19.5, I'm going to pop open. Actually, I'm going to stop sharing just break stuff. This is the first bug report I've seen. Jacob, have you seen other ones besides this one?
I have not been patrolling, to be perfectly honest, but somebody who works with one of my clients actually sent this to me because they were like, bugs already. And I was like, oh, that's a good one.
Well, what's interesting about this is this a dialogue. Now, I understand it's in French or whatever this is in here. I can kind of zoom in a little bit on it. But the short version is that the person translated, it says, the message says that the field called ID_L is intended to contain a value, but the layout does not allow the value to be entered. Use another template to enter this value. I have never seen this dialogue ever. So it must be a new dialogue or a new error condition that Claris has resolved, except it's firing off somehow inappropriately. So clearly they're adding new features, and they're at a minimum doing all the integration with Claris Studio, right? So who knows? So that's.
I wonder if this is one of those things where you add or you fix checks that have been broken for a long time, and then now it works, and now people are running into it.
Cool. All right. So let's get on with this. So questions today from people. Margaret, if we have question patrol, I'm going to transfer control. Stand by. We're going to transfer control to Jacob Taylor.
Awesome. So FileMaker Server 19.5, one of the changes, we know there's Linux support that's been in there. Previously, we had a conversation about CentOS, and it was Ubuntu, but it was Ubuntu 18.04, which is a little dated. With 19.5, that situation improves a lot, actually. So we have the option of actually continuing with Ubuntu 18.04, Ubuntu Server, or 20.04, which is not like the most recent long-term support version. They have a fresh 2204. If you are catching on to the numbering system, you might guess that that's the year and the month that it was released. And if you guessed that, you would be totally correct. And so, it's from 2000, but Ubuntu long-term support, they have like 5 and 7 years of support for them. So we're it's well within the window. We're good to go for several more years deploying a server like this. So very first thing is we have to deploy the server. So we're going to go over here and click this thing. We have to launch an instance. We're going to name it something.
We'll keep going. While we're doing this, I just want to point out that someone says, well, I'm more familiar with Windows. I'm less familiar with Linux. So why would you want to use Linux? Well, you use Linux for one of two reasons, only one of two reasons. One is that you have a person who loves Linux and they work for you or somehow they can help you, which is great. The other reason is that if you have an Amazon server, a virtual server, these EC2 servers, half the cost of the Amazon server is tied up in the license fee you pay Microsoft for using the operating system. Half.
Yeah.
And so that means that if you go to a free operating system, that your price of your same server with basically the same performance, and there's an asterisk on that, I'll cover that later, but the same level of performance, your cost goes down by half, right? So that's substantial, right? But it is Linux, it's not Windows. And so if you don't know anything about command line, maybe it's not such a good investment, right? So
correct. Yeah. And so it's a good point. Our customers on it actually it's half and it gets worse over time. So I'll put it this way. So for a lot of our customers, we put them on the T series systems. We'll get into the instances very quickly here in a minute, but there's T2s and T3s. It's a little bit like a shared model of sorts. You get a certain number of credits on the CPU and whatever. We won't get into too much of the details here, but it's not like you don't get 100% like, oh, I have a quad core and I get all of the horsepower all the time, 24/7, 365. It's not quite like that. Effectively, it is because none of our customers actually beat their servers quite that hard, but it's not, you don't get the 100% all day, every day, every minute, every second. So when you move to an instance where you do that is much closer to something like a dedicated server, this would be, for example, an M5 or something like that, you pay full actual Windows licensing, and Windows licensing works based on the number of cores and the number of CPU sockets. I'm not going to talk about any of the details because I don't know much about the actual pricing beyond that's how they assess it. And then there's other things that go into it as well, features and that kind of thing. But the core thing that matters here is basically the CPU kind of core count, socket count, that sort of thing. When you have an M5, it's actually worse. So you're gonna maybe do 25 or 30% of the cost for like a T series one is the Windows licensing. It is closer to 50% for the M5s, and the savings moving to Linux get even larger. Because you don't like, if you get an 8-core M5, it's expensive if it's a Windows machine. They're not cheap if it's a Linux one because it's an 8-core with like 64 gigs of RAM or whatever. But it's not. It's $150, $200 per month less, and the difference is the Windows licensing. So it can be substantial, but there's this different management conversation about who manages the server, skill set of your employees to deal with that, etc. If you have people on staff that like this stuff, yeah, go for it, of course. And this is Ubuntu 2004. That's what we're going to use today, and it's good. Honestly, it's the basis of what I use on my own personal computer. So. Not the server, the desktop edition, but still.
Cool.
So we're doing
and then once again, the LTS is long-term support.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that while other versions of Ubuntu might be deprecated or removed, the LTS will be supported for a very, very long time. Right? Is the idea?
Yeah, correct.
It's like when you talk about finding a stable version of FileMaker and you want to sit on that for a while, right? If you're crossing a stream and you're stepping on rocks, for those who've never done this before, some of the rocks across the icy cold stream in the mountains as you're hiking, some of the rocks are pretty stable. Some of them are kind of shifty. You want to find a stable rock and stand there and take a breath and plan your next move. That's what the LTS versions of Ubuntu are, right?
Mm-hmm. So for this, I'm leaving it a little locked down. So I changed this from allow. So SSH is command line access to the server. I'm not going to make it defaults to like anybody can access it forever, always. Anywhere on Earth, the Russians and the Chinese can come and try and log in. They won't get in, but they can try. And so I'm limiting it to me, but we do need at least the 2 web ports. We're going to revisit this. The security group is the kind of the Amazon firewall here. We're going to revisit that in just a moment because I think there's another block down here. And we need a bigger hard drive. So let's go with like 100 gigs.
Yep.
And just as a recommendation, no. Oh, I see what it did. Okay. Just as a recommendation here, if you have the option between GP2 and GP3, always pick GP3. That's it. It's like, if you all remember, maybe 7 or 8 years ago when SSDs first came out, right? They were life-changing versus a spinning disk, but they weren't ultimately that fast. That's a GP2. GP3 is kind of not the NVMEs that you could buy if you spend a little money on it these days, but the current kind of generation regular old brick SSDs. That's
500 megs a second is the
correct. Yeah. Yep. So
megabytes a second.
Megabytes a second. Yeah. They're and on Amazon it spikes up to 500. It's I think the long term is like 125, but that's consistent and low latency. So it's plenty for most things. As always, you see these other options down here. So if you wanted, for example, a provisioned IOPS SSD, Amazon is happy to take your money for additional performance. They're expensive. I'll say nothing more. They're expensive.
Okay, so stop for a second. This list is not, go back to that list. That list is not like top of the line at the top and the bottom. It's not.
No. It's kind of randomly ordered. It actually goes. So these 2 are pretty like cheap.
The GP2 is the bottom of the line. The next up from that is GP3.
No, I wouldn't. That's why I wouldn't. I would hesitate. It's not ordered that way.
Okay.
So these are kind of general purpose SSDs. They're cheap but a good value. These are just expensive if you need blistering performance, like gigabytes per second of performance. You can pay for that here. It's expensive, but you can do it. Cold SSDs is old school hard drives, like an eco drive, a spinning disk.
Wow.
Throughput HDD is like a 7200 RPM or so instead. It's kind of that sort of level. Yeah, it's good for big files, very specifically for like stripe write operations. So for example, if you are dumping the zipped copy of your database somewhere, you could dump it onto this drive. That would work well. Okay. But we don't use that just because the cost savings compared to the SSD doesn't matter. Once you get to the point where you're like, oh, I should save money because it's hundreds of gigabytes or something like that, then actually it flips back the other direction basically immediately because the performance is more interesting at that scale. And we tell you to, for example, if you're like, I need to store terabytes of data inside of FileMaker, we say don't do that. Put it, do an S3 integration, store it in Dropbox, do something else with that data if you have that big of a storage requirement. And then magnetic is, yeah. So
okay, so Dean says on the Discord, our AWS FileMaker Windows server utilize ODBC connectivity to MySQL database tables. On the Linux FileMaker server, are we able to utilize ODBC connectivity?
Yes.
Yes. You'd want to just check I would go into Claris's technical documentation and read. I would never assume that everything is perfectly equal matching on both sides. I think it is in this situation. But
yeah.
Yeah, but like if you had a Mac server and you wanted to do that kind of stuff, would it work? I don't know. Maybe you'd have to make sure.
It's not fun to set up, to be perfectly honest. Linux ODBC setup is editing an INI file in a special location on the server. So, like put the host, it's the database details that you'd put anywhere else. So the host name, port, username, password, table, et cetera, et cetera. That the basic configuration that you might be used to otherwise. But it has to go in a text file on Linux. They have not. And it actually drives me up a wall because Cloud One had a beautiful interface for adding these ODBC connections on the FileMaker Cloud Admin Console, and that it might even exist on Cloud 2. I'm not sure, but it doesn't exist on the server, and it would be fantastic if that got brought over. To be honest,
Okay.
Because that was
Thank you.
that was a huge upside for a couple of my customers specifically. So
Okay.
all right, so
Now
we're
we're
going to change
take our
this.
server to.
Yeah, we don't want a T2 micro. That's not
No.
enough.
At least
Your minimum spec is a large, frankly. If you have 5 people only, you can get away with a medium, but I think 19.5 officially says you want more than that. So they finally, I don't know.
Is our main server at RCC? I go back. Is it a scroll back?
You're one of these.
T3 extra large. So it's a 4.
Yeah, it's an X large. It's a quad core 16 gig of RAM.
Yeah. And we have
we beat the heck out of it. That holds up pretty well.
Are we on Linux or Windows still?
We're on Windows.
Okay.
Yeah. Our web server's Linux. Our web server's actually Ubuntu. But yeah. So we'll do the T3 large. That's a pretty good. It's a dual core 8 gig. That'll last you to probably 20 people logged in. If you don't do anything else, it's pro and go, basic usage, etc.
And you don't have a giant database, right?
You don't have a billion databases or terabytes of data. You don't have 75 different scheduled scripts that run all day, every day, etc. If you do, you bump it basically. So, but in general, if people are between 10 and 20 seats, that I put them on a large. So.
All right.
Past 20, we start talking about the X large. Hold on, I want to double check and make sure. I'm boggling because this interface has literally changed since yesterday. So if I there it is. Okay, that's what it's not showing me. Yeah, this whole thing is new since we've shot any of our videos. It didn't used to look anything like this, and that edit thing didn't happen yesterday either. So it's yeah. They're adjusting things. All right, so here's our entries. This is what I thought I was going to be showing everybody. So here's my SSH. It's got my IP in, and that's me. That's our office here in Los Osos. We're open on. Whoops, sorry. There's 2 of them here. We're open on web, and we're open on the other web, which is HTTP and HTTPS respectively.
Oh, inbound traffic on both of those, right?
Yep. And the one I wanted to add, because it's the other one, is we want FileMaker, and so we do custom TCP.
I need a test question for someone who's not Kyle Williams. I need
not Kyle Williams.
Someone give me the answer on what is the FileMaker. And some of you don't answer the question. I'm looking for a more junior person. Answer the question. What's the port number for FileMaker that it uses? What's the port number? It's like a specific frequency, right? No. Okay, David, you're close. It's 5003. Monkey Christian Schmidt, do not answer the question. Whoa. Port numbers changed in 19.5? What port number changed in 19.5? Christian Schmidt.
I'm unaware of a port number change in 19.5. Except for what, WebDirect workers? I think those all.
Yeah, well, I ran into that yesterday. I ran into how you access the server. We're going to get this done. We're going to talk about that change.
Yeah.
You need 5003
We'll show you. Yeah. And that was a 19. The admin console port change was a 19.4 change.
Right.
I think 19.5 further consolidates WebDirect workers. They're just reducing the number of ports generally, which makes enterprise IT stuff quite a lot happier. All right, sorry, I didn't do that. So custom, we're going to do anywhere because we don't want anybody ever, and that's it. So what we've done is we picked our Ubuntu 2004. We have a T3 large. We've created a security group, which is our firewall, with 4 holes poked in it, 1 very minor hole and 3 big giant anybody can log in holes. And those are the 2 web ports that you want. That'll deal with your container data, admin console, that kind of stuff. And then the last one, of course, is FileMaker data. You want Pro to be able to talk to it, Pro and Go. The web ports also do WebDirect. Sorry, I should have said that. And then we have a 100 gig drive, and it's an SSD, so it's nice and modern, not
so,
blisteringly fast, but quite good enough.
For David Angel, that used to be the case. What we're telling you, and I ran into this yesterday on live TV, we're going to run into it again today, is that they don't use 16,001 or 16,002 or any of that stuff anymore. It's all 80 or 443 or 5003, kind of across the board.
That's it. Yeah. The only other port that's of relevance is if you use FileMaker Server as an ODBC or JDBC data source. There's a $24.99, I think. Don't quote me, but I think that's the number, or $23.99. Sorry.
All right. So you told it to launch the instance, so that's spinning up, right?
That's it. Yep.
And we also specified the. Well, there it goes.
Yeah, it'll be up in seconds probably. So
what we ran into yesterday is I was on my Safari browser and I was going to log on and check out. So I had it was trial. Right, I had trial.rs at rcc.com.
Yep.
Right, and then I would do colon, then 16,001. Right, and so you're like, did I have that?
That's the local only port. It's 16,000 flat.
Oh, 16,000 flat. So this is the old one that everyone expects to see, right? Bad request. I think it has to be HTTP.
HTTPS. Yes. Or it'll tell you to jump in a lake.
Which is what it just did. So everyone recognizes this. This is is important. I'm sure it'll be on the certification test when they redo the certification test. This is changed as of FileMaker 19.4. And so yesterday we set up a 19.5 server, and I was trying to do this, and I'd forgotten. And so to access the server from yesterday, what was it was live or something, or let me see. It's
19.5 Linux or 19.5 Windows.
Yeah. So what they did is here's the server, right? Right here. So if you hit this, you can say, FileMaker database, right? This is the domain. And then what you do is you have this, right here, you have this whole string here. So instead of 16,000, you got this admin-console is all you have to do, right? And then it'll bounce you, I think, forward to the login here, right? See that? So that is, and so because we're on HTTPS, we're using port 443, right? So that's back to that, right?
So we got our launched over here. I'm gonna go click on this one, which will take us over here and show it. There's the name I gave it. There's the instance ID. Here's all your details, etc. Neat stuff in Amazon. You can see status checks, which won't do too much right now. Monitoring is useful again, there'll be nothing here because the system is just booted. This gives you 5-minute data though, and that's useful while it's running at least. And it's all kinds of stuff, all basic details about the system, CPU usage and stuff. But it's from the perspective of Amazon, so it's outside the bubble. It won't tell you anything about which process is using all your CPU or something like that. Just that something is.
So now we need to install FileMaker.
Yeah, correct. So we're going to take this public IP. I'm not going to do an elastic IP. Do you want to do an elastic IP? Do that? Okay. So we'll just take this one. Usually you'd get and associate an elastic IP. Humorously, that is a static IP if you, that's what that actually is. These, if you shut the system down long enough, you'll get a new number basically. Yep. So I'm going to come over here. I have prepared a couple of things here. So we're going to I need to talk to this server, and we have the IP. So I have this. This is probably going to fail, hopefully, in a way where it's useful. So for all Ubuntu systems on Amazon, the default username is Ubuntu. That's it. So you just do @Ubuntu and pasting the IP in that I just copied over.
Admin or something or whatever. Yeah.
Correct. Yep. You have admin capability. It just requires an elevation. And so the power to grant yourself admin is given to your user, which is why you don't need to actually log in as the admin user.
Okay.
So if I do this, it's going to ask me, and we're in. Awesome. So
are you sure you are connecting? Yes or no? Fingerprint. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So this is a trust on first use interface, basically. First time you connect to the server, it'll ask you this for kind of obvious reasons. You'll never be able to validate if this is correct. However, if you come back at some point in the future and it's different, you have a problem. So under the hood, this wrote this set of details into a little text file on my computer. So if I ever come back to this this combo, whatever, Ubuntu at some IP, and it gets a detail back that's different from this right here, it will scream and refuse to let me connect and say something has gone horribly wrong here. You need to deal with it, you the human, because this is unexpected to me. You told me that it was supposed to be this computer, and that computer is now telling me it's somebody else, sort of thing. So it's kind of like having an SSL and then validating it, and it fails validation, and your computer says, no, I'm not going to allow you to connect. Obviously it'll also tell you how to override it if necessary, but yeah. So first thing that you'll always do here is you will update the computer on Ubuntu Linux. That is done with a program called apt, A-P-T. So we're going to do sudo apt update, and that's going to pull whatever, all the software packaging, or all the software sources in. That'll probably tell me I have an update available or something like that in about 2 seconds. There it goes. 9 packages. Perfect. We'll do upgrade. It'll think about some things. Yep, whatever. Sounds great. It's just, new software. You always update your servers when you get into them. And then I think I have to install one thing for this to go. So I'll do that. We'll reboot, but I'll do that before we reboot. It's going to update its little boot image. Once it's done with that, it'll be like, congrats, thumbs up, we're good to go. I'm going to install, there's one utility that's necessary. It's just because it doesn't come installed on Ubuntu by default, which is zip and unzip, right? Like zip files. And so we're going to install those really quick. Those are necessary because and I'll show you this, but when you get the Ubuntu installer from Claris, it's zipped up and you need to like unzip it on the server. So, right, you need that follows that you need the utility to do that. So we're going to do sudo apt. Again, this is the program. We're going to install zip and unzip. I probably don't need zip, but it's fine. Done. All right, cool. So we're going to reboot. We'll give that about probably 15 seconds, maybe 30. We'll go back in, and then we're going to download the FileMaker server installer and get on with it. That part of it doesn't take too long, actually. The install is only a couple minutes. So,
all right, questions from anyone?
I'm just grabbing the Ubuntu zip installer. This is the one that we give all of you, but it comes direct from Claris. So wget is like web-get, right? It's a download utility. It comes on most Linuxes. So we have it. That's it, right? FMS, blah, blah, blah. Here's .zip. Cool. We're going to unzip, and then what is this? FMS underscore something. A cool tip for not every, but most command line situations. If you start typing the beginning of the thing that you're trying to deal with, for example, a file name or something like that, and you hit the tab key, it'll fill it out for you. There's some kind of funkiness in that where, for example, if I had 2 files and we had like a FMS 19.4 something and an FMS 19.5 something, it's going to stop you at 19 dot because it doesn't know there's a 4 and a 5 as the next choice, and it's going to wait for the human to specify which one. But I'm going to do this. This is going to pop all of the necessary files out. There you go. You're done. And then let's start the install. So for this, we go sudo apt install, just like we did before, but we're going to change, rather than telling it, hey, we need the package name, zip, unzip. That's a thing that, comes from the internet that, the server knows how to find that for you. We're going to specify this file right here this is the install file, right? FileMaker server something, and then AMD64 means that it's a 64-bit server. And so we're just going to do which means current / means current location. And I do FileMaker, and so it'll go, oh, okay, cool. We do that, and it's going to ask us a bunch of questions. I don't know what any of this stuff is, so we just say yes, right? It's all the FileMaker stuff. And at the end, it's going to start going into the actual install here, which will be that set of questions. That's, what do you want your admin console credentials to be, that kind of stuff. So we're going to do Claris primary machine. That's 0 or 1. You can tell a user experience designer designed this. What are we looking for? Set up a FileMaker Server admin console. This is our username, so we're going to do admin. And we love a super secure password, so we're going to go password and do that again. And we're going to pick a number here that goes in. We're going to confirm that number. And now it is doing the thing. So it's whatever, creating its little prerequisites that it needs on the server to run FileMaker Server, and then it's unpacking the software itself, which is this last line before the ugliness continues. So
where does the license cert file get installed? Is a question from Lewis.
that's going to be the last step. You can do it on the command line, actually. I don't, because it's annoying. So there's two ways to approach that. You can do it on the command line, which is there's like an import command for it. The second option is, before we ever did this install, there's an assisted install.txt that is for that actually works in Pro as well, but it's relevant here, where you can define a path on the server where the license certificate exists. And so if that's set up, it will try to pull it in when you install the software, like automatically for you. So
Yeah, so you'd have to install quite a few servers for that to matter, right? I mean, it's
I do it on the, to be perfectly honest, I do it on the admin console because it's easier. Assisted install. This file, it looks like this, right? Cat means give me the file. Give me the contents of the file, spit it out for me.
Okay.
So you can accept the license ahead of time. This is the deployment option. So is it a primary server or a WebDirect worker? Right, admin console user, password, and PIN. You saw it ask me those questions, and then license certificate path. So if you give it a full path to the license certificate, which is located somewhere on the server, it will try to load it for you.
Suddenly something occurred to me, something that we've been kind of, well, for people who've been testing Claris, the products before they ship, there's this debug text thing, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And that is a text file that you load that can be auto-loaded when server starts or when Pro starts, right? And we have not done a live stream on that, right?
Yep, correct.
That would be, so what they're, I'm just going to point this out. I'm sure without me asking everyone, they're going to want to see this, but you can turn on certain features of server that should be frankly a checkbox somewhere somehow, but instead it's a command line. It's called debug text on. This is a conversation that I would probably have with Monkey Bread Software. He would know this. Also Hansa. I got a list. There's a lot of like little secret things commands that you can put in that causes FileMaker Server and frankly Pro to do interesting different things, right? Enable certain features, disable certain features beyond the default behavior of the product, right? So we should probably do that because this assisted install over here is somewhat different than the, I'm not sure where that went. There's annotate there.
I'll explain what I'm doing here in a minute.
Yeah, it's
I'm working while you're running.
This annotation right here, for those who see this, that's one of several text files that can read into server. And this one is specifically during the install only, right? And then after that, it doesn't look at it anymore. But I'm talking about one called debug text. And debug text, yeah. And so as a result of that, that's one that's read every time the app starts. So FileMaker Server spins up for the first time during that restart cycle, or Pro spins up, right? And so you could turn on or off the parallel backups. You could turn on or off server-side summaries. I think probably server-side sorting too. There's a
flag for summaries, yeah, and sorting.
Yeah, and so I was given the secret. It's kind of like the secret handshake, right? If you go to In-N-Out Hamburger Place and you ask it for doggy style, right? I think you get the hamburger a different way. You can go there and ask them for that, and so yeah, you can ask them about the doggy style thing, and you can get it special stuff. So it's like a config file for In-N-Out Burger. It's like the secret handshake to get into the clubhouse, right? So
what I did while he was talking is, so we were talking about this assisted install.txt. We have a wildcard SSL certificate, which means Anything .@rcc.com, that's it, end of the sentence. Anything under that can be vouched for by the same set of SSL files. And so I came over here, I brought them up. This is a nido command that you can do, which is it's SCP, which is a file transfer utility that uses SSH, which is the command line thing that we're actually talking to the server over. So I used which means who's my identity. You saw that in the other command when I logged in. So I'm identifying myself. This is my identity file. If you don't have the file, it'd be like a username and password or something like that. But that is considered the old way to do things. We don't use usernames and passwords anymore. We have a key file. So I did that. I had a folder that's got these two files in it, right? The key and the zip. And that's inside of, I even misspelled it there, good. Asterisk SSL. And then, so this is where do they come from? Where are they going to? And so this is, that's the server address that we just set up. And then I want to put it in the home folder that I'm working in right now, which is that one. And so you run it and it goes, okay, great. And it pulls all the stuff and just pops it up for you. So then I came back over here, couldn't remember the command because I forget it every single time. And so I used the FMS admin help to remember how to use the certificate command. And the example I'm working off of is this one right here. They tell you like how to create it and stuff like that. We don't actually do that. You can though, there's nothing wrong with it. But I use this example specifically, which is how do I manually import a certificate file? Our key file does not have a password on it, so we don't put a key file pass, that's all. And so then I just combine it. So it's that, and then this command as well. And so you can see that put together down here. That's the command, FMS admin certificate import, certificate name, and then intermediate certificate. This is the bundle. And then what is our key file? And that's the .key, right?
Okay, so real quick, Margaret, I don't know if you asked this. Lewis says, where does the license cert file get installed?
Again, that is the last thing that we do. So it goes into the admin console in the administration tab, which you will see once the server is done rebooting.
Okay, yeah, I think maybe we asked that question twice. So.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. Well, are we there yet? Do we need to reboot this thing or what do we need to do?
I just did it. Yep. I just told it to reboot. I'm going to go to Linux. There's my address. So this may not be live yet. Yeah, it's timing out. Perfect. Okay. So the DNS is live, but the server's not up yet. Refused. Awesome. It's booting. It's almost up. So this is one of the oddities. This happens if you do a command line SSL import. I've logged in right for the first time. And so it's supposed to take me to the do the SSL interface. This interface is really difficult to get to before you have an SSL installed. If you're local on the server, like you've got a Windows machine and you go to the local host address to deal with the admin console, you get around it. And so it doesn't matter.
You're saying if you're physically at the machine.
Physically at the machine or remoted into it that way.
Yeah, this is Amazon data center. We don't even know where the hell this thing's at.
This server particularly, it's Linux. It doesn't have a desktop installed, so I can't remote desktop into it or screen share or something. Okay. So I have to. That's why I show the command line way of bringing the SSL in, because otherwise this whole thing is 10 times more painful than necessary. But the way that Claris solves this is it comes in and it's like, oh, you're supposed to pick about the SSL. Well, we gave it an SSL already, and then it goes, oh, okay, we do that, but it has to go, oh yeah, I see you, thank you, sir. So we go, okay, perfect, and that's it. And so there is no actual license in here. This is the demo. That's the demo one. But ordinarily, right, here's your trial, your lovely 45-day unrestricted everything, and you just do import, and then you would locate your license cert file.
Okay, there you go. So to answer your question, Lewis, that's where you would go and do that, right? So.
Yep. So that's it.
Yeah, because the minimum for a server, the minimum is get the server installed, get the SSL installed. Literally, that's the minimum.
The licensing. Yep.
And then probably fix the database cache size and make sure that the auto start shenanigans.
That'll be over here. Yep, it's this thing.
Okay, we turn that off.
Disable it
by default because That
Yeah,
on?
everything else that you absolutely need to modify is on the command line. So
Yeah.
that's like name it. So if you're on FMSP, I think FMSP mostly names your windows for you, but like a lot of other FileMaker solutions, they don't the server name will appear in the window title. So if you put
Yep.
like the host name here or something about your company or something like that, your company server name, if people are familiar with that, then you can do that as a trust building and make sure they're talking to the right thing and that kind of stuff. So useful for users, but ultimately cosmetic. And then disabling this is important for the safety of the databases. So.
Okay, cool.
We do also recommend email notifications be enabled. It's an extra, but I recommend it because FileMaker will complain when it has problems, and often, but not always, those complaints are useful.
Okay. Can you
Post setup,
back,
web direct, stuff
back
like that over here. All this stuff's off by default. Yes, you
go
wanted me to
back
go
real
somewhere?
quick? Go back to where you just were. It was the email notification. You're going to turn that on. Go over the local. Put your mouse over that. I just want to see that. What is that? Local notification. That we used to train on that, and I display on the machine where the admin console is running and pair even when the admin.
Yeah, so I don't understand that one because you could do that on a Windows or a Mac, for example, but like you're not supposed to use FileMaker Server in a workstation scenario, so I don't know why you would. I've actually literally toggling this for this live stream is the first time I've ever turned that button on. So yeah, and the help doesn't tell us much. Okay.
Yeah, it really needs to do local notification settings to certain connected users, right? So,
Yeah, I would love to be able to, for example, wire that up to my phone somehow, or like I don't know how that would work, but something like that would be lovely. But
well, you can submit your request to Claris and she can process it for you.
Yep.
All right. So, any questions, Ken Tooley, Ed Bradley? Dean is there. Dean was digging this. Dean is a Linux person. He loves this. I'm somewhat
worth noting on Linux. There's no conversation about getting a Java version on there. It comes with it. So I can just turn it on. We have to wait a couple seconds for it to actually go. But
any other questions about the Linux installation of 19.5? So what do we know so far about 19.5? That it's available and we don't have enough telemetry. Like I have a very senior experienced engineer whose name is, I'm not going to repeat, comes to me and goes, and we actually asked Jacob 2 days ago or yesterday, hey, do you recommend 19.5 to our customers? And I'm like, we don't have an opinion on this, right? We don't know if it's good or if it's bad. So if you want to like have your customer be this like beta test victim person, that's cool, right?
Yeah, if you want to be the guinea pig, please install 19.5 and then tell me how it goes.
Yeah, let us know how it goes. We had that one bug report, but I mean, so people are like, well, should we install it? I don't have I don't have any telemetry one way or the other. It might kill you, destroy your data, light it on fire, and then leave, and then uninstall itself all behind your back, right? So, I mean,
here's the new feature. That's it. Yep. Oh, that's a nice little description. Learns to group related database files through transaction commits. File groups allows FileMaker Server to improve response and throughput by only pausing databases in the same group.
Yeah, you have to have this only really works, to be honest with you. This feature right here is only useful if you have a FileMaker server. Say you're at a Fortune 500 company or Fortune 100 company or someplace somewhere, and you have a FileMaker server and you're running a set of files, not one file, but a set of files for each department. And those files work together to become a one solution. So 5 files, they create one solution for marketing, 5 files or 6 files for one solution for sales, 8 files for engineering. It's going to back up the engineering files together, the sales files together, the marketing files together. That way it doesn't pause all the groups hodgepodge, right?
So one thing I pulled out from what Connor said yesterday on stream is and that's the conceit. Actually, the current backup system without this feature turned on, to be clear, pauses all files simultaneously, and it has to be able to get a lock on all files simultaneously. And so you can imagine if you had 55 files or something, and probably not all of them are going to be amazingly high traffic, right? That most businesses are not like that, but several of them might be very high traffic theoretically, and that could cause problems for the rest of the business and for the rest of the backup system. And so this would enable the FileMaker server to separate that one file out, for example, from the rest of them. Or likewise the other direction, maybe it pauses everything but the high traffic file, and then does the high traffic file when it can, basically, that sort of a thing. That makes sense to me. It was just something I pulled out reading between the lines of what Connor said yesterday. And so that makes sense, especially if you're talking tens of files and some of them are higher traffic and some of them are less. So it's an obvious.
Well, at RCC, we have 20 plus, 30 plus files, and they're all kind of used loosely in parallel, right? And so there's not going to be separate groups there. It's just going to still pause the whole.
Oh, I definitely will someday put us on 19.5, and we're going to turn it on and see what happens.
That's after the people on Discord test it for me to make sure it's good.
Yeah, correct. I want to see how it groups the files.
Because here's the thing: eventually, Claris will rewrite the libraries for this, the parts that are negatively affected. But someone posted, "Hey, it's like, hey, I've been running these speed tests, and this thing sucks in a couple specific instances." Now, the cost is also half the cost, so you got to decide that you could also buy a bigger server and offset it with that, or once you get it, I think using
or just
Linux,
be patient if it doesn't. Like that was the thing of the example that they figured that one out on, which was the summary fields. It's a reporting system, and so it actually is huge, and it took 40 minutes on Mac or Windows, and they tested it on both, and it was plus or minus 5% between the Mac and the Windows. The problem is that it wasn't 40 minutes anymore; it was an hour and 20 if you ran it on a Linux server. And they were very excited for obvious reasons about putting this thing up on a Linux box because it's cheap. It's much cheaper than either of those options. And it was dog slow performance.
For that one thing, so we're not saying it's universally dog slow, but whenever you do something in a computer, and this is for everyone who's not technical, especially the people on Zoom, there are different little sub-programs that fire that do stuff. If you say, draw me a chart on the screen, draw me this, give me a total, it's activating little blocks of code here, little block of code here, little block of code here. Remember, FileMaker came from Windows and Mac, and specifically the Linux version comes from, the Mac was turned into a Unix project, because Apple went to Unix or Linux or whatever. And then they took this code and recycled it back into Linux, right? Well, somewhere along the line, there's some sort of program over here that runs just fine over here, but over here, it's not really optimized for Linux. They have a couple little small spots they have to optimize. Would I use Linux if I had a high availability or reliability of a Linux technical person, which I do? If I didn't have access to a Linux technical person, like on easy phone call, then I wouldn't use it. Listen, if I had Mac people and they're like really dyed-in-the-wool Mac folks, and that's my support people, I'd use a Mac server somewhere. I just would, right? So it's whoever's going to be taking your tech support call, and you expect a level of competence from that person. Unfortunately, that's the way this kind of rolls. It really does, right?
Yep.
So anyway.
And so because of that, we have several Linux servers internally, and we've been doing them because it's like, oh, great, it's half the cost, and we can, have our junior engineers beat the heck out of it. And if some function's a little slower than everywhere else, it doesn't really matter because it's not a production system. It doesn't.
Yeah, well, even if it did, we don't run that terrible many large finance reports and stuff like that. The finance people would be okay. It wouldn't be the end of the world, especially if I told the finance people that, hey, it's going to take an extra 5 minutes, but you're saving, $300 or $400 a month or something. They'd be like, yeah, we'll wait, right?
Done.
Martin says, just for beginners, question for using the server. I set up files for guest check, one word, check-ins. So he's doing a check-ins for an event, like a trade show event, right, Martin? Something like that. Yes, sir. Just put a wire in. Means that I have to set up a file for the event, and after I'm done with the file version, the safest way of using the file download. Yeah, we need to have a chat, Martin. Yeah, so Martin's talking about using an offline copy of the file and then somehow bringing it back and using it. We had the same thing. Yeah, we were doing this in 96 before the internet was reliable. The internet was down all the time. It'd be up, it would down. Back when T1 was some bad high-speed network action, right? So yeah, we did Cisco Systems Event. We did PeopleSoft, which became part of Oracle, Sun Microsystems. And I've been there when I watched FileMaker developers screw the job up so bad that people were lined up out the door trying to in line for registration. It was out the door and around the block at Moscone Center because they screwed the FileMaker stuff up so bad and they didn't test it. And that person got fired and I was brought in. All right, well, that's it for today. Tomorrow we're going to be back to beginner action. So Martin, you probably should chat with me sometime offline. Like we can share war stories and I'll tell you, what we do is how we did stuff. Okay. That's it for now, everyone. I'll catch you tomorrow. Beginners, tomorrow we're back to beginner land, all right? All you experienced FileMaker people, take a vacation. Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir.